And here is part 2 of the Logan Desk build. This is the revamped, re-edited video. And after I've shot a few nails in, all I do is I go through with a punch tool. Because I'm going to be rounding over this piece, I'm going to really set them far below the surface so I don't destroy the router bit. And that's coming up next, but you're just going to punch these well below the surface just to make finishing a lot easier for yourself. Alright, now right here I'm just using a round over bit. It has a little bearing on it, and the edging here my wife is pointing out, even though I knew I didn't want it to be like that, that it was incorrect. I'm sure we've all been there, and of course I did another round of it. I made sure that it was just enough, so I got that just a round edge and no other pattern into it. And then of course I'm gonna set up and do the actual piece. So that was a test piece. Now we're going to do the actual, and this is pretty forgiving. So you start it up, you go down, you can go back and forth all you want. It's not going to mess it up. And here we're just going to putty up the holes with some wood filler. You can see I got quite a bit there. You want to keep the cover on these wood fillers. They dry out quick. And I'm just using my finger, and I just keep rubbing back and forth until there's an even surface. For some reason, I've found this way best. Essentially, it just makes for a lot less sanding down the road. And then, of course, if there's any imperfections, I just come in and do it again after I've sanded. It gives a seamless look. You can't even see where those nails are actually in the project. This trick here is something I learned early on, and it's a really neat trick. All you do is you take wood glue, fill a seam or crack really tiny, and then use the sander to create sawdust, and it's almost like its own wood putty, and it'll really close that up and make it look nice. And of course now we're going to hit this with the 180 grit sandpaper, I believe this is. We're going to go through the whole project. We're going to sand anything out. You remember that I put back, front, forward, bottom on the inside. I'm going to go in and sand that out too. Some of it I have to sand out by hand. I actually have to bring it into the shop, and because I didn't have the vacuum attachment yet, I have Tesla solar batteries now, so I have to do whatever I can to keep the dust down inside, and that's what I do. So we're going to go over and just use a roller. We're going to use a brush on any of the 90 degrees or any part of the project where the roller can't address. That's something to keep in mind when you're doing this project. You're going to need a brush and a roller. You can't just do just a roller. So this is more of a detail work. So you just want to go slow. You don't want to get too much on the brush. So you're just gonna get the tip as close as you can to the edge without going over, and then you're just gonna slowly keep pulling the paint out. And then when you're done, you can kind of give it a wipe in the front, like I just did right there, to clean up any excess so you don't get any drips or drops. But it is something that it just takes some time and some attention to detail, and if you're careful you won't get any inside. But if you don't want to be careful and you feel like taking the time, you can tape. I've had hit and misses with tape, so sometimes it works great and then other times it doesn't. But I prefer this method, just taking my time, and of course if anything spills over, you know, I can just go back and wipe it up, especially if you finish the inside with like either a lacquer or water-based poly. That would, you know, if any paint does get inside, you can just wipe it up. Because the wood's now sealed, you're not going to have to deal with it. But I didn't do that, so I did not have any issues, and that's something I always look forward to. But again, the painting and the time it takes, painting just takes a long time, and it's this detail part that adds the time to it. This is the middle part of the tabletop. I'm going to hit it with the tack cloth one last time. I'm going to check for any high or rough spots that can wreck the finish. And then I'm just going to start right and move left. I'm using a Poly Shades, but this is the Home Depot brand. Stain and Poly Mix, I'm going with a gloss. The first coat went on really rough, so you put your hand over the surface, it felt like sandpaper. I of course hit it after that with a 220, kept putting on coats until it was smooth. So I did about 3 coats. So I hit it with a 220, then a 320, and then so this is each coat is a poly coat, but it's also a color layer. So what I'll do at the end of this is I will put on a gloss finish of oil-based polyurethane. Now I prefer oil-based for a desktop because you can get in 1 or 2 coats of that clear coat the coverage that you need, and it goes on thick. So if you use a water base, it's not that you can't use a water base, but you're looking at about 7 to 8 coats to get what I can get with an oil base. And then here's that sanding step that I showed you. I'm using a sanding block, but I just hit it with this is the 220 and the 320, then the 400, and then steel wool for my poly coats. It works great. It's gonna knock down all the high spots. You're gonna notice it's gonna get all scratched up, and that's fine. The next poly layer is gonna fill all that in, and you're gonna have nothing to worry about. One thing to note, if you're working in a garage at night, keep the doors closed, make sure that it's screened, because I had bugs flying in at night, something I didn't have to deal with during the day. They got into the poly and they ruined it, and I had to go back and repair it. All right, now we're starting the shelves. So the shelves that go right or left of my monitors are being built right now. This is a 17-inch by 39.25. That's based on the bulkhead that's above the desk. So these are the routes I was just talking about, just marking my lines, using the rail system to guide the router, and then I use the 3/4 inch bit. It's one pass. You do have to go slow with these hand battery powered Ryobi routers. They tend to bind up and quit. I had to restart a couple of times because I went too fast. And then you see that circle I get at the bottom because it shifted at the end. So you just want to hold it steady. Don't rely too much on the wood, because you'll get those circles. They're not that big of a deal, but with wood glue and making sure that it's setting up correctly and every part is holding together, you want that surface to be flat as possible. No fixing it other than some filler. You could use some Bondo filler, but I just kind of leave it and use brads that crisscross. So I'll do one from the side and then one straight down, and then that way it's really not going to go anywhere. And then of course the wood glue is really going to let it set up and add some strength. Alright, and here we go with building the shelves to the right or left of the desk. These are pretty robust shelves. They have a 17-inch depth minus the route, and then of course that half-inch there where I'm going to put a board. Here we have the positioning squares that I'm just using to make sure I can get the boards in a good position. Alright, here I was having some issues with some delaminating, so I had to drill holes for wires, and they just happened to work out on either side, the exact same spots delaminated on either side. So all I did was, drill through 2 layers of 3/4 inch. I put this hole saw in reverse to prevent it from kicking or bucking and hurting the finish. And then of course, as you get deeper down into the project, you don't have to worry about as much. You can go forward or backwards, but you gotta hold on tight. Alright, so you're going to see the way I designed this desk. I designed the middle to be able to get pulled out. That way I can get this desk mount in there. And you can see in the back that I've actually routed out a small section of that just so I can do that. And I went about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch in the back just so I had space for wires. And then of course I had the measurement for the mount, and I expanded that measurement on the other side again for wiring and anything that I would need, so I wouldn't have to drill through the main part of the desk. I might have to later on if I keep the keyboard up top. I just like hidden wires, and it just means I'm gonna have to drill probably an 1.5 inch hole in the middle of that. Alright, here's an instance where I forgot to turn on the camera. I got that right piece in. It's a good thing that you didn't see it, because my wife comes down and points out that it looks completely out of whack, and then you step back and it really does. So what I had to do is pull it out and start over, and I use a 45-degree here. Actually flip everything around, and instead of that seam being on the left there, it's now on the right, but I was able to use everything over again. But essentially there's some trickery of the eye here. There's a 1-inch drop from left to right. You usually use this face frame, so you create your shelves to be the same size Whatever gap is going to be there is going to be there. And then from there, you're going to use that face piece I'm putting in, some trickery of the eye for that wall drop. So that way it looks level. It looks like everything's the way it's supposed to be, even though behind it, it isn't. Okay, face frame time. So here you just want to be careful with any imperfections in the wood. In the front, there was actually a piece, and I'll explain where that is later. I did have to do a lot more finish work than I would have liked. You just got to watch for the pieces of wood that you're using and make sure that they're sanded and filled so that they look nice and smooth when you do paint them up, because you are going to notice any imperfections. And here I just wanted to show you how I painted the shelves. Here I just used a roller. I really didn't have to worry about anything else. I get it all the way around, except on the left and right. I didn't see a need to paint that. You want to be careful here with the coat. You don't want to go too thick with it, because at the ends, it can tack up and it can just cause problems with fitting your shelf. So you just go light with it. You don't have to go too much, too heavy on it. You're really gonna cause problems with that. And of course, down the road, if there's spots that you missed or that look thin, you can always go back and add another coat. Alright, there's gonna be some shaky camera work here. There's nothing I could do, but I'm just kind of showing. This is maple, so I'm using other pieces of wood for my measurement, but I'm trying to show you what I'm doing is I just kind of draw a line, and then I'm going to use the miter saw, and I'm going to cut just in front of that line, and then I'm going to keep using the other piece of wood, essentially get the most accurate measurement that I can get to the first. I do this because I was having a lot of consistency issues by just measuring it out as opposed to using the other piece of wood. Some people say that this will get less accurate as you go on, but if you keep using the other piece and making sure that it's flush on a flush surface, again, you got to make sure that your miter saw cutting square. But you can see I'm just gonna feel the top of these. I'm gonna put them on a flush surface. I see, oh, okay, there's 32nd to a 16th left. Okay, I'm gonna go confirm that there's how much is left, and then once I get, okay, it's supposed to be 9 inches, that's 9 and a 16th, I have to take a 16th off. I'm just gonna take 30 seconds off at a time, usually 1 or 2 cuts. You really just want to go slow because you want these to be as accurate as possible. Now we're ready to get the shaker style doors built. This should go seamlessly now that I've gotten all my cuts done correctly, and I'm just gonna wood glue them, clamp them up, and then screw them in with the pocket hole screws with the drill bit. Once we have all that done, they're built and they just have to be routed. We're gonna build 8 all together. Right, so here I'm just using my router with the 1/4-inch routing bit, and I'm just gonna, it has there's that ball bearing that prevents me from going too far over. This likes to jump here and there, and if you don't do the clamps right, obviously you'll get stuck up on those. And now we're gonna cut our MDF. Now you can use plywood, 1/4-inch plywood if you want. Everyone told me to use MDF, and I did. I originally tried attaching this with a staple gun. Staple gun didn't work so well, and I ended up using pins. Alright, here I'm just cutting the MDF to size, and what I'm just going to do is, this is the last part of the MDF that I'm going to cut. I'm going to cut the corners off to make sure that it can fit within that space. Now when attaching this, I ended up using pins. I do try a staple gun initially, and that didn't end up working out. You're going to see it's a DeWalt. I put the maximum amount of force that I could on that staple, and they still wouldn't go in. So, and I had a pin nailer, a Ryobi one, and I ended up using that to attach them, and it worked fantastic. And this is the European style hinge jig from Craig Jig, and it worked great for this. I highly recommend going out and getting one because it made this job so easy. And now we're just getting ready to mount the hinges. You just want to make sure that they're horizontal, you know, as square as possible. What can end up happening is if you do attach them and they're a little bit out of whack, is when you go to attach them, that they either won't attach to the mount or they'll be so tight that you won't be able to close the door. And I actually have an issue with that on one of them, and I think that's just the adjustment issue that I'll show you in a second. But you can adjust them back, forward, up, down, and even, you know, they can push out and pull in a little bit. Okay, so when I went to install these hinges, I thought I had bought the correct one. There's a couple things you need to know about building cabinets. There is frameless and there is framed. With frames, there's typically a three-quarter inch overhang to an inch overhang. And I didn't do that. I made everything flush. I was doing inset doors. I didn't want any overhangs, and it really came back to bite me because when I went to buy the hinges, no one really made anything for that, and that was a pain in the butt. So what ended up happening, I ended up having to adapt these with a piece of MDF until I can get the correct hinges. Everyone tells me they make them, but I can't find them at Home Depot, not at Rockler, nowhere. I've been having a tough time even getting the hinge that I want, and everyone is always bringing up, is it frameless or is it framed? And I say frame. They go, well, this one should work because it's framed. Well, no, the frame needs an overhang, and I did flush. Now, I used the frame to hide the plywood, and everyone was telling me what you should have done is just use a veneer. But the thing is, remember when I was telling you earlier, my cuts were a little out of whack by 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch, and that would have essentially affected the face frame without this 3/4 inch piece. With this 3/4 inch piece, I was able to adjust and fill with, you know, caulking to make it look nice. Now, you know, I'm telling you all the time, I have to show you all the imperfections that were not perfect over here. I want to show you how to adapt to problems, and you can fix those problems down the road. But if you're trying to get something done, well, you're gonna have to think about it and make adjustments. Now here I'm building the file cabinet drawer faceplates for shaker style. And this is just me showing you how I do it with the Kreg jig. Basically, I bring it to the edge of the Kreg jig, the holes on either side, to the right or the left, not the middle one, and I drill a hole. And really easy, you know, you want to go up and down a couple of times, make sure that that's clear. If you got to set your depth, so if you're dealing with 3/4 inch material, you need to make sure it's 3/4 inch. And you also got to set top of that drill. There's an Allen wrench screw that you'll be able to adjust that cylindrical piece to act as a stopgap or a guard from going too deep. And then here I just show you me gluing them up. I use Kreg jig clamps. You know, I ran out of the fine thread screws. I had to go to the other ones. You know, this is just me piecing those together, and then I'm going to route these up. Now I tried cutting these up, the circular saw, and whatever aggravation. This is me making the drawers, and I needed accurate cuts, as accurate as could be. My other cuts were coming off, 16ths to a 32nd, but it was a problem. So this, I was able to get the cuts exactly the way I wanted. Trying to remember my measurements here. 19.5 by 8.5 for the sides, 12.5 in the middle. Oh no, it was 12 and a 16th in the middle, and then at the bottom, so when you do the bottom plate, it's 19.5 by 13 and a 16th. Pretty straightforward, but you know, the measurements on that, you know, you got to get accurate. You want to make sure that the box that you're going to make is square. The height that you're doing is actually for a file. So if you're wondering if a file folder is going to fit in this, where they have those overhangs and they just kind of hang there, this will accommodate for that. A little attention to detail can go a long way, and having these planers is something that you should invest in. It was well worth the investment because I was able to perfect things with the planer. So you can't always rely on your miter, circular, or table saw cuts being accurate, but if you go a little bit over on the measurements, or a bit, not over on the measurements, but over on the cut just a little bit, so that's out of square, and of course I can take that 16th off. Really easy to do. Now I set up the camera up top, you can see it wiggling here, and then I just put everything together with some wood glue. I used a little bit smaller version of those square pieces that I have to make sure that it's square. Again, you can get these on Amazon. And then I just use my brad to nail into the piece of wood. You can see I forgot to reload it. Pretty straightforward. And you're just going to do each side and then put on the bottom piece once you've made sure it's square. Alright, so now I'm doing my file drawer mounts. I picked these drawer slides up on Amazon. They are the soft close. They're 20 inches long. I didn't go with 22 or 23 inches, although I could have. The problem that I would have run into is those wires in the back. I didn't want the drawers being interfered with. With the file drawer rails that I'm putting in, there is a screw hole that essentially are going to be longer. You can do that for the vertical or the horizontal. For the horizontal, I went with those so I could slide them back and forth, and then of course the back screw doesn't have any of that, so you will have to undo the back screw if you need to adjust. But these are going to go flush to where the cabinet meets the face frame, and that's going to give you that 3/4 inch gap for the inset cabinet. And I see I'm getting ready to mount. I'm just going to use that 1/8 inch of those paint sticks to keep my gap, and then I'm going to attach the front first. I don't think I used the screw hole I'm telling you about first here. Oh, I do. Okay, so that's the one I'm talking about, and that'll allow me to slide it back and forth if I need to. Here, I'm just using my Kreg jig. Now you see I'm making sure that it's level. Of course, your project has to be level. Could have some problems there. These clamps, it works great. I use the file drawer to give me the gap and the spacing that I want. I really recommend a lot of these Kreg jig tools, and a lot of them are inexpensive. So here I'm just using my orbital sander. You can see that I filled everything for the pocket holes with a maple plug, and then I just sand them down. I think I used an 80 grit to sand those down, and then I go to, I believe, a 120, then to a 180, and then I just sand everything, make sure it looks nice. I tend to leave MDF alone. Sometimes I'll hit it with a 220, but you can see here I'm just going over those rough edges around the pocket holes and making sure that everything's nice and flush, and it's going to look nice even when I open it. And here come the reshoots. So I didn't get the camera footage for this, so I'm actually just taking the finished product and trying to show you, just how you are going to mount them. You see that these work great. Now I'm going to open this up and I'm going to show you 3 different screws. One pulls it in and out, so forward and back. One goes up and down, and then the other, this is where these hinges really shine. And I really love these hinges because of this feature. It makes it so easy. I can't give praise to these hinges enough for how easy it is. If I was off so much as a little bit, I would be grumbling, yelling. They just make it work. Now, moving on, you can see I already drilled the hole, but essentially I think I go down 2 3/4 and then 1 inch and 2.5. What's half of that? So this is 1 1/4 inch. You're just going to center that and then drill a hole and then put on your hardware. Now, the hardware for this worked perfect, but for your file cabinets, you might run into a problem. You might want to pick up some 3/4 inch screws for file cabinets, because it'll come with 1 inch and I think 1 3/4 inches, or it's pretty long. So here you can just see me taking the measurement for you, showing you what I did. You just mark it with a pencil, try to get it centered, and then uniform with all your other doors. All right, so this is just me showing you what I did to drill these holes. You can actually still see the line that I had. The hardware that I had, I didn't have to cover this line up or paint over it or erase it. You know, you're gonna make sure that's 9 inches. So half of 9 inches is 4.5 would be center. And then you're gonna measure down from the top, whatever you think is center. So your file face frames, these shaker sets, they're all gonna be different, you know, based on what you want. With this, I do measure from the top in this video, but you actually wanna go from the shaker style door down. And you want to be a little above center. Actually, this was 3 1/8, so it's 3 1/8 down, and on either side it's going to be another 3 1/8. Just drill the hole after you're done. Now to mount these, I did use a pin nailer initially. If you don't have a pin nailer, you can use a clamp, or you're going to need someone to hold it, and that can be frustrating because this is an inset door. All right, everyone, I did lose some of the camera footage at the end, but I hope that this was good experience in showing you how I went about creating my version of the Logan Desk. I was originally planning on something similar to this, only I was going to do one big cabinet door on either side, and then the file cabinets just made more sense. But yeah, this is the Logan Desk, or my take on it, and this is how I went about making it. Guys, if you liked the video, please like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't like the video, give me a thumbs down. I know that there's always stuff that I can do better. You know, sometimes I make these videos and I feel like there's a lot lacking. It isn't justified. Here, I lost a lot of footage at the end, and unfortunately, you know, some of those finer details. Guys, if you have any questions on the things that are missed, just message me. I'll take the time and I'll see about getting you some information so your project can come out just as good as this, if not better. I'm Joe with Dissecting DIY. You have a good day.